Once Upon a Crime. In the final episode of The True Tale of Lizzie Borden, we reach the dramatic climax of one of America's most notorious true crime stories. Part 3 takes you inside the courtroom, where the defense made its boldest moves, tensions ran high, and the jury delivered a verdict that stunned the nation. But the story doesn't end there. What really happened to Lizzie Borden after the trial? And how did the outcome shape her legacy for generations to come? Stick around as we uncover the final chapter in the chilling saga of Lizzie Borden. If you missed either of the first 2 parts of this video series, click on the links below. We'd love it if you'd subscribe to the channel to help us reach 20,000 subscribers. Share our videos with friends who love true crime or stories from crime history. Thanks so much. Here's part 3 of the true tale of Lizzie Borden. After 7 days, the prosecution rested its case against Lizzie Borden. Now, the defense's job was to convince the jury that their client was innocent. Lizzie's attorney, Andrew Jennings, made his opening statement. He told of the many years he'd been acquainted with the Borden family and said Andrew Borden, the victim, was a close friend. He outlined for the jury his client's upstanding reputation in the community as a Christian woman and church member active in charitable works. The prosecution's case was, quote, wholly and absolutely circumstantial, Jennings said, claiming the police had rushed to judgment and, quote, fastened this crime upon Miss Borden for some reason or another, end quote. Jennings told the jury not to be swayed by theories. Their job was to determine whether the prosecution had furnished the proof the law required, that, quote, Lizzie Andrew Borden did it, and that there is absolutely no opportunity for anybody else. He pointed out that there was no direct evidence against his client. Not a spot of blood, no weapon, he said. He also told the jury to consider that there was no motive for Lizzie to kill her loved and loving father. While he spoke, Lizzie dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief in a rare display of emotion. The defense began calling its witnesses. Neighbors of the Bordens described hearing strange noises at odd hours and seeing suspicious strangers near the Borden home, not long before the murders. On cross, D.A. Knowlton asked the witnesses to describe the sounds they'd heard, but their answers were vague. Descriptions of the alleged strangers lurking in the neighborhood were equally vague, and precise timelines of these sightings could not be pinpointed or corroborated. Several witnesses testified that on the day of the murders, they observed several people, neighbors, police officers, and others, walking through the Borden house, yard, and barn. The implication was that the crime scene had been compromised to such a degree that the investigation was tainted from the start. Jennings also elicited testimony to show the jury that, contrary to the prosecution's assertion that an outsider couldn't have entered the home and committed the murders, many people easily entered the Borden home through several access points soon after the bodies were discovered. If spectators had hoped to hear from the defendant herself, they were sorely disappointed. Lizzie Borden made only one statement at the conclusion of the trial. "I am innocent," she declared to the court. "I leave it to my counsel to speak for me." But a hush fell over the galley when her sister, Emma Borden, was called to the stand. If they couldn't hear from Lizzie, then Emma was the next best thing. She was the closest person in the world to the defendant, and it was eerie how much they resembled one another. Emma Borden was stern and serious on the stand. The Borden sisters were grim-faced even on the best of days. Emma wanted to ensure that the jury took seriously every word she said. She gave a glowing reference for her sister, saying that there was no blemish on Lizzie's character. She also scoffed at the idea that her sister had a financial motive to kill their father. Emma outlined Lizzie's financial assets, which were substantial for an unmarried woman at that time. Emma insisted Lizzie wasn't in need of an inheritance, nor did she harbor any resentment toward her father. She shared the story of the ring Lizzie had gifted their father many years earlier as a sign of her love and devotion as his daughter. Emma said Andrew Borden, touched by such a sentimental gift, wore it always, and it, quote, remained upon his finger at the time he was buried. According to Emma, Lizzie and her father had been greatly bonded to one another. Emma also provided an excuse for the burned dress. The prosecution contended that Lizzie had burned the dress because it was stained with blood. Emma said this was nonsense. She testified that she had told Lizzie to burn the dress that had been ruined when it was brushed up against fresh paint. The day before the dress was burned, Emma asked her sister, "You have not destroyed that old dress yet? Why don't you?" When Lizzie brought the dress into the kitchen the next day and said she would burn it, Emma claimed she'd remarked that it was a good idea. Besides, when Lizzie was burning the dress, the windows were open and officers were outside. Why would she attempt to destroy evidence in full view of the police? Emma asked incredulously. As far as the animosity between Lizzie and her stepmother, Emma said that her father gifting property to Abby's sister had caused trouble, but it was she, not Lizzie, who harbored resentment toward her stepmother. Abby had been more of a mother to Lizzie, who'd been but a toddler when their father had remarried. Emma, 9 years older, had not been as close to Abby, she explained. The prosecutor tried to impeach Emma's testimony, but she remained largely unflappable and was an excellent witness for the defense. The most senior member of Lizzie's defense team, former Massachusetts Governor George Robinson, gave the summation. His closing statement took almost 4 hours, and Lizzie sat in rapt attention the entire time. Her life hung in the balance, which Robinson made sure to emphasize to the jury. The crime had been brutal and shocking, Robinson began, and it had no precedent in Fall River. The police were overwhelmed as a result, he contended. After all, quote, police are human and nothing else. It therefore should surprise no one that mistakes were made, he said. The horrific nature of the crime, the public pressure to find the killer, and the media frenzy surrounding the case led them to rush to judge the most convenient suspect, Lizzie Borden. He then went point by point to cast doubt in the jurors' minds about the defense's case. He dismissed the missing note Lizzie claimed her stepmother had received, saying that notes go missing all the time. He also implied that the housemaid, Bridget, had confirmed that a note had arrived that morning. This was a complete fabrication. Bridget never said she'd seen a messenger or a note. She'd only heard it from Lizzie. As for the prosecution's claim that there was tension in the home and Lizzie was hostile towards her stepmother, Robinson, speaking to an all-male jury, said it was trivial nonsense of the female variety. Women living in close proximity to one another tended to get caught up in petty bickering. This rationale was condescending and insulting to women, but in 1892 was an accepted stereotype. The defense continued in this vein as Robinson explained the defendant's conflicting stories during her inquest testimony. She'd been rendered incoherent because the prosecutor had badgered and bullied his client. Lizzie, confused and intimidated by these aggressive men, mixed up the details, but this was not evidence of her guilt, he said. Robinson went so far as to say that the inconsistencies in Lizzie's answers were evidence of her honesty, not deception. Honest people are not always particular about punctuation and prepositions, he scoffed. So what if she couldn't remember she'd been upstairs, downstairs, in the barn, or in the yard? Do you suppose that your wives and daughters can tell the number of times they went up and down stairs 6 months ago on any given day, he asked. He brought up the ring Lizzie had given her father, which he cherished. As Robinson spoke of Lizzie's love for the victim, both she and Emma wept openly, dabbing at their eyes with lace handkerchiefs. Robinson explained that the many locks on the doors of the Borden residence were not evidence of a house divided, but merely to keep people out. Interior as well as exterior doors? Doors to upstairs bedrooms that were only connected by other rooms? Both doors had to be locked to keep people out? Robinson told the jury that Andrew Borden was not the cheap penny pincher he was made out to be. Mr. Borden had provided a lovely home for his family. It was heated in the winter, had carpets on the floors, pictures on the walls, a piano, and a library. So what if family members had to carry their waste down 2 flights to the basement to empty their chamber pots? Okay, so I added that last bit of snark. Robinson also reminded the jurors of Emma's testimony that she and Lizzie had money and property in their names, There was no financial motive for the murder, Robinson said. As far as the evidence the prosecution believed was the most damning, the burned dress, Robinson said it had not been definitively agreed on which dress Lizzie had been wearing the morning of the murders. Was it dark blue? Light blue? A flowered pattern? Solid in color? No, there was way too much confusion to know with any certainty that the dress that had been burned, a not out of the ordinary female chore, he emphasized, was the same one worn the day of the murders. Even if it was, witnesses said they did not see a spot of anything other than paint on it, Robinson reminded the jurors. Then he pointed out facts and testimony that pointed to innocence. First, the lack of blood on the defendant or her clothing. Second, the brutality of the blows that, quote, could not have been made by a woman. In addition, the prosecutor had failed to prove which of several hatchets found in the Borden home was the murder weapon. He also said the ease in which people came and went in and out of the house during the investigation meant it could not have been as secure as the prosecution claimed. Anyone could have come off the street, committed the murders, and fled, Robinson insisted. So the prosecution's contention that only Lizzie had the exclusive opportunity to commit the crime was false. He played on the jury's sympathies, describing Lizzie Borden as an orphan who needed guidance and protection from authorities after her father's murder. Instead, the lawmen who should have protected her accused her of a heinous crime. It was ridiculous to believe that a woman of good standing, unblemished character, and delicate sympathies like Lizzie Borden could have the physical, mental, or emotional presence to commit such a brutal and heartless act, her attorney argued. Robinson further claimed that Lizzie was duped into testifying at the inquest while she was under the influence of tranquilizers and still processing grief and shock over finding her father and stepmother butchered in their own home. Robinson's strategy was to appeal to the jurors' sympathies and remind them of the gravity of the decision they were about to make. The evidence presented against his client was wholly circumstantial, Robinson admonished them. You are trying a capital case, a case that involves her human life, a verdict which, against her, calls for the imposition of but one penalty, and that is that she walk to her death. He then pointed to Lizzie Borden seated in the courtroom, her head bowed. He directed a final question to the 12 men of the jury. To find her guilty, you must believe she is a fiend. Does she look like it? The attorney's question hung in the air as jurors took a long look at the prim and proper spinster, dressed all in black. Her gloved hands held a folded fan, which she now opened and fanned herself daintily, while maintaining the solemn expression she'd had throughout the trial. Thinking about trying Ozempic, Wegovy, or other GLP-1 medications, but the high cost or complicated process has you hesitating? You're definitely not alone. That's why there's Zelfie, a smarter, easier, and way more affordable way to get started. Zelfie is a 100% online service that helps you access medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, semaglutide, or tirzepatide at up to 90% off traditional prices. No appointments, no pharmacy lines, no insurance headaches. Just real results made simple. If you qualify, licensed prescribers will handle everything, and your meds get delivered straight to your door. Seriously, this is healthcare made for right now. Getting started? It couldn't be easier. Just send a text. Text the word ONCE to 200-300 and get your personalized link to see if you qualify. That's ONCE to 200-300 for a link to your exclusive offer. Don't wait. Your health, your confidence, your momentum, they're all just one text away. Text ONCE to 200-300 today. Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplans.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. Consult a doctor prior to use. Maybe you can relate to my problem. I want to eat healthy, but when I open up my pantry, all my snacks are on the naughty list. Ugh. Well, I found a great solution to still get my snack on with healthy alternatives that satisfy my salty and sweet cravings. Thrive Market. Thrive Market is my go-to online grocery store for getting all my healthy essentials delivered, and the prices are so much more affordable than your local organic store. Thrive Market is a no-junk online grocery store that bans over 1,000 harmful ingredients, taking the hassle out of eating well. Finding better groceries and snacks than the not-so-good-for-me ones I used to buy is easy with Thrive Market's Healthy Swap Scanner. Check it out. Just scan a product and it instantly recommends healthier alternatives. Plus, you can filter products by diet, non-GMO, high protein, keto, and so many other categories. I filled my snack cabinet with so many tasty goodies, and I didn't feel guilty. A few Thrive Market finds I keep on hand now are Catalina Crunch Keto cereals. I love them with milk or just by the handful as a snack. So good. Bolt cookies and my new fave, skinny dipped sweet treats like milk chocolate peanut butter cups and dark chocolate salted caramel bites. Yum. And guess what? They're all low in sugar and at a lower price than my local grocery store. Are you ready to make the switch? Go to thrivemarket.com/onceuponacrime for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/onceuponacrime. thrivemarket.com/onceuponacrime. Tax season is here. Okay, maybe not your favorite time of year, but it is the perfect time to make smart money moves. Maybe you're getting a tax refund or qualifying for the Earned Income Tax Credit. So now what? Pay off debt, save for that dream trip, or maybe invest in your future. One of the smartest ways to do that is to build your credit. And if you want to boost your credit fast, I'm here to tell you about Kickoff. Kickoff is the #1 credit building app in the App Store. Plans start at just $5 a month with no credit check, no hidden fees, and 0 interest. Seriously. I've been using Kickoff myself, and I've seen real results. Every on-time monthly payment helped build my payment history. Watching my credit score go up felt like a win every month. If your credit is under 600, you could jump like 84 points with on-time payments. So don't sleep on this. Use your refund to make a move that future you will thank you for. Tax season is the perfect time to take control of your financial future. For a limited time only, get your first month free at getkickoff.com/once. Don't wait. That's kickoff without the C. Get your first month free at getkickoff.com/once. Kickoff. Build credit, build confidence. Must sign up via getkickoff.com/once to activate offer. Offer applies to new customers first month only. Individual results may vary. Subject to approval. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions may apply. Kickoff credit service starts at $5 a month for 12 months. Average first-year credit score impact of plus 84 points, Vantage score 3.0, between January 2023 and January 2024 for Kickoff credit account users who started with a score below 600, who paid on time, and who had no delinquencies or collections added to their credit profile during the period. Late payments may negatively impact your credit score. DA Hosea Knowlton now stood to give his closing argument. He knew it would be difficult to convince jurors to vote for guilt, since the two most important facets of his case, the inquest testimony and Lizzie's alleged attempt to purchase poison the day before the murders, had been excluded. He began by reminding jurors of other unlikely criminals. He detailed the case of a Fall River minister who was convicted in 1832 of killing a pregnant woman, and of Jesse Pomeroy, the 12-year-old boy fiend who beat and tortured several children before murdering 2 when he was 14. I covered that case in Season 1 of Once Upon a Crime in the series Killer Kids. Women were not exempt from committing heinous crimes, Knowlton said, sharing the story of the Borgia of Somerville, a Massachusetts woman who was accused of poisoning several members of her family for insurance money. He said women, quote, are human like unto us. They are not better than we. They are not worse than we, end quote. Knowlton also included female stereotypes in his summation, but unlike Robinson's claim that women were incapable of the worst cruelties, the prosecutor contended that in some ways, they might be more likely to lose control of their behavior due to their inherent emotional nature. What women, quote, lack in strength, they make up for in cunning, in ferocity. If their loves are stronger and more enduring than those of men, on the other hand, their hates are more undying, more unyielding, more persistent, Knowlton said. The prosecutor focused the majority of his closing statement on the most compelling argument left to him. The medical evidence proved that more than an hour had passed between the 2 murders. He claimed it was nearly impossible for an intruder to have killed Abby and gone undetected in the house for that length of time before attacking the second victim. The only conclusion that made sense was that Lizzie Borden alone had committed the murders. To counteract the defense's claims that a woman could not have been responsible for the vicious hatchet attack, Knowlton reminded them of the testimony of medical witnesses who described the blows to the victims as haphazard in nature. Some struck at an angle, badly aimed at the top of the head. Some struck in the neck, badly directed, he told the jury. If the victims had been struck with an axe wielded by a man, they would have been decisive blows with more strength behind them, he claimed. Instead, the wounds varied in angle, depth, and location, suggesting a person of lesser strength and experience with a hatchet, i.e., a woman. He then commented on the character of the defendant, saying Miss Borden was petty and wicked for having become jealous of the financial help her father had provided for his wife's sister, and then still being unsatisfied when he'd attempted to appease her by giving her property of equal or greater value. The prosecutor described how Lizzie had harbored deep animosity for her stepmother for years, which eventually spilled over to her father as well. Their living arrangement, in such proximity to each other, with deep resentments festering, became a powder keg that turned Lizzie Borden murderous. Quote, "These people day in and day out, year in and year out under the same roof, compelled to eat the same bread, sleep in the same house, meet each other morning, noon, and night, yet maintain this strained unnatural hostility. This was a cancer," the prosecutor dramatically concluded. Judge Dewey gave instructions to the jury before they began their deliberations. His words would be analyzed for years and are often credited for the trial's outcome. More than merely providing instructions on weighing the evidence they'd heard and coming to a conclusion, Judge Dewey offered commentary on Lizzie Borden's character, motivation for the crime, and even his opinion about the evidence presented. He began his statements by explaining that, by law, the jury was not to consider prior proceedings, including the inquest, preliminary, and grand jury hearings, as evidence in their deliberations. He explained that proof beyond a reasonable doubt means, quote, proof to a moral certainty, as distinguished from absolute certainty. Okay, so far, so good. Then he went rogue. The judge reminded jurors that Lizzie Borden's, quote, character has been good, one of positive, active benevolence in religious and charitable work. He lectured the jury that they were not inquiring into the action of some imaginary being, but into the action of a real person, the defendant, with her character, with her habits, with her education, and her ways of life. The judge reminded them that the prosecutor did not need to prove a motive, but added that although the state had provided one, quote, imputing a motive to the defendant does not prove she had it. He then added commentary about the alleged note. Quote, would it not have been more natural for her to say simply that her stepmother had gone out, he mused aloud. Incredibly, Judge Dewey then offered a theory, asking the jury to contemplate the possibility that someone other than the defendant had committed the murders. This still unidentified killer may have written the note himself and then removed it as part of his plan, Dewey speculated. The judge also shared his disbelief that a woman like the defendant could have killed her stepmother and then gone about her day as usual before killing her father. Finally, he admonished the jury to, quote, deliberate with impartial and thoughtful minds, seeking only for the truth. The jurors then left the courtroom to begin their deliberations. One reporter described Judge Dewey's instructions to the jury as follows. Had he been the senior counsel for the defense, he could not have more absolutely pointed out the folly of depending on circumstantial evidence alone. Less than an hour and a half later, the jury announced they'd reached a verdict. As they returned, a hush fell over the courtroom. Lizzie Borden sat rigidly in her seat, focused intently on the jury. Before the court clerk could finish his sentence, asking if they'd reached a verdict, the jury foreman blurted out, "Not guilty." A celebratory shout rang out in the courtroom, followed by a larger shout of joy from the hundreds gathered outside. Lizzie slumped in her chair, leaned forward on the railing, and sobbed. The judges called for order. The clerk asked the jury to state their verdict unequivocally. Gentlemen of the jury, you upon your oaths, do you say Lizzie Andrew Borden, the prisoner at the bar, is not guilty? We do, replied the jurors in unison. At that, it was announced that court was adjourned and the defendant was free to go. Robinson hugged his client. Melvin Adams took both Lizzie's hands in his and congratulated her. The jurors approached Lizzie one by one and shook her hand. She returned their well wishes with tears in her eyes. Lizzie, imprisoned for 9 months, returned to her jail cell, gathered her things, and set off immediately to return home to Fall River. Although Lizzie Borden had supporters who decried her innocence throughout her 9-month incarceration and trial, not long after her return to Fall River, she found herself a pariah. At first, her arrival was met with great fanfare. Over 1,000 people waited to greet her carriage. She didn't return immediately to the house on 2nd Street, instead spending her first night as a free woman in the home of friends who lived nearby. She was sent flowers and telegrams of congratulations. The jury that acquitted her even posed for a photo after the verdict and sent it to Lizzie as a gift. Through their shared ordeal as the 12 men who decided the outcome of the trial of the century, they became fast friends and stayed in touch by meeting annually for years afterward. Because of the notoriety of the case and the intense media coverage of the trial, Lizzie's Fall River friends and neighbors believed that she and Emma would move away to Boston or New York to escape the infamy that now surrounded the Borden name. But they were wrong. Lizzie moved right back into the 2nd Street house. Even before her acquittal, she had access to her father's fortune via Emma. This enabled her to afford her top-notch legal team, including a former state governor. 2 months after her acquittal, with the inheritance secured, Lizzie and Emma purchased a 14-room Queen Anne-style mansion on French Street at the top of the hill. Her new home in the most desirable neighborhood in Fall River had all the modern conveniences, a dream to which Lizzie had long aspired. Lizzie also changed her name to a more mature version, Lizbeth. She and Emma named their home Maplecroft, even carving it into a stone wall at the entrance. They used their inheritance to live a life of luxury, hiring a staff of servants and traveling to New York and Boston to shop and attend the theater. Support for the Borden sisters soon cooled. Their working-class neighbors had never counted themselves as Lizzie's supporters. One local newspaper, the Fall River Globe, was Irish-owned, and its readers were primarily mill workers and farmers. The Globe pegged Lizzie as the most likely culprit in the murders and reported on several details that weren't widely published elsewhere. Information about the inquest testimony was leaked. One detail that emerged was Ellis Russell's testimony regarding the burned dress. Ellis had spent several nights after the murders in the Borden house. After consulting with an attorney, she finally came forward and told investigators what she'd witnessed. Ellis testified that 2 days after the murders, Lizzie entered the kitchen and pulled a folded dress from the back of a pantry cabinet. Emma asked what it was, and Lizzie said it was an old dress that needed to be burned because it was stained with paint. Emma and Ellis had looked at each other, and then Emma went back to what she was doing and didn't say another word about it. Emma and Ellis both watched Lizzie burn the stained dress. Another detail that emerged regarded Lizzie's behavior in the days after her father and stepmother were slain. Even though the couple had been butchered almost beyond recognition, the bodies of the deceased remained in the home until the funeral, which was the custom at that time. Andrew and Abby Borden's bodies were laid out side by side on mortician boards in the dining room. Lizzie walked in and out of the room during daily tasks, with no hint of emotion playing on her face. She barely acknowledged the bodies were there. Emma avoided going anywhere near the dining room. Perhaps Fall River's upper crust could not ignore these more tawdry and telling details. Or maybe the novelty of the trial of the century had worn off, and now they just found it distasteful to associate with an accused murderess. In either case, criticisms of Lizzie Borden and her sister began to circulate. Some thought the sisters lacked decorum for moving into a mansion on the hill, using their murdered father's money, and then flaunting their wealth so openly. They also found it pretentious to name their home. This just wasn't done, except by a few of the most upper-crust members of society. Even they didn't display the name in such a tacky way as the Borden sisters had done. Kara Robertson, legal historian and author of Lizzie Borden on Trial, had this to say, quote, "The elite that had rallied to her support during the trial pretty much cooled in their enthusiasm as soon as she was acquitted. That they didn't want to see her convicted of murder doesn't necessarily mean they wanted to invite her to tea." Lizzie was shunned by Fall River socialites who ignored her invitations to lunch or tea at Maplecroft. A month after her acquittal, she attempted to return to services at the Central Congregational Church and found herself surrounded by empty pews. No one wanted to be associated with Lizzie Borden. Even more humiliating, perhaps, was when school children began to throw eggs at Lizzie's new house and pull other pranks. They taunted her when she was in town, making jokes and singing early variations of the Lizzie Borden rhyme that most American schoolchildren know so well.
Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, gave her father 41.
Lizzie began spending time in New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C., and attended the theater often. She became a patron of the arts and donated money to support these venues. Her new circle of friends included stage actors and directors. Lizzie began a close friendship with an actress named Nance O'Neill. She threw a lavish party for the cast of O'Neill's production, sparing no expense. Champagne flowed freely in the home of the woman who had once been a dedicated Christian Temperance Union member. Around 1905, Lizzie and Emma had a falling out, rumored to have been caused by Emma's disapproval of Lizzie's new friends. Emma consulted their reverend to complain about happenings at the French Street house, of which she strongly disapproved. There were rumors that Lizzie had become too friendly with a, quote, fine-looking young coachman who worked for the Borden sisters. There were also rumors that Lizzie and Nance O'Neill were lovers. However, it appears that Emma's anger towards her sister had more to do with Lizzie donating money to O'Neill and her acting company. It's possible that Lizzie was in a romantic relationship with the actress, but it's just as likely that O'Neill was taking advantage of Lizzie's happiness over having a friend. Lizzie had complained to her father about her inability to entertain in their home. The irony was that no one in Fall River society would accept her invitations when she had a home where she could entertain. Lizzie now enjoyed hosting her actor friends whom she wished to impress with her wealth. Like her father, Emma considered entertaining these people a waste of their resources. Because of it, she and Lizzie quarreled, perhaps for the first time. Emma decided to move out of Maplecroft after determining it unbearable to continue living with her sister. They remained estranged for the remainder of their days. It is hard to fathom why Lizzie Borden chose to remain in Fall River. She had the finances to make a new start anywhere she chose. Maybe purchasing her new house in town was simply an instinct. Fall River was all she'd ever known. Perhaps it was to fulfill the dream of living on the hill. But after she realized that she was not wanted or accepted as part of Fall River society, and although the terrible crime that most now believe she was responsible for was a constant reminder, she remained in Fall River. She endured taunting and teasing from Fall River children. She was whispered about and avoided by her neighbors. And on each anniversary of the murders, local newspapers rehashed the city's most infamous crime and trial of the century. Lizzie Borden was acquitted of murder, but she could not escape her bloody legacy. She and Nan O'Neill parted ways after a few short years, and she lived quietly at Maplecroft surrounded by her beloved Boston Terriers. After a bout with pneumonia, Lizzie Borden died at home on June 1, 1927, at the age of 66. She hadn't seen or spoken to her sister Emma in over 2 decades, but their bond must have remained strong nonetheless. Emma passed away from kidney disease just 9 days after her sister. She was 76. They were buried alongside Andrew and Abby Borden in the family plot at Oak Grove Cemetery in Fall River. Stories about Lizzie Borden and theories regarding the murders continue to this day. 60 years after her death, a retired nurse named Ruby Cameron, who worked briefly as a caregiver for the aging Lizzie, claimed that she'd confessed that her boyfriend had committed the murders. He'd hid in the closet after killing Abby and waited for her father to return before killing again. She'd been in the house when Abby was killed, the nurse claimed, but her lover had sent her to the barn while he attacked her father. This, if true, would implicate Lizzie as an accomplice. However, no stories about Lizzie having a male companion before or after the murders, besides the rumor of a dalliance with her coachman, have ever come to light. If a man had been seen visiting Lizzie, it would have been widely reported. As you can imagine, theories about the prim and proper Lizzie Borden and secret lovers have abounded over the years. People continue to speculate about her relationship with Dr. Bowen, and one can only imagine how that affected the good doctor and his Fall River medical practice. Tongues even wagged about a possible affair between Lizzie and the housemaid, Bridget Sullivan. This is unlikely. Lizzie couldn't even be bothered to learn Bridget's name, instead calling her Maggie, their former maid's name. It's doubtful that they were ever intimately involved. One issue that's been raised was the obliteration of Andrew Borden's face during the attack. Psychologists have weighed in on this detail, saying that it indicates a great deal of rage directed towards him by the killer. If Lizzie was responsible, this level of anger had to stem from something more serious than greed, they believe. The theory that Lizzie was a victim of sexual abuse by her father has stemmed from this line of speculation. Emma Borden has also been considered as an accomplice in the murder of her father and stepmother. She was out of town at the time of the attack, but could this have been by design? Some have suggested that Emma hired a hitman. The reports of men lurking around the Borden house in the days and weeks before the murders are cited as evidence. This is an intriguing theory if you consider that Emma promised her dying mother that she would protect and care for her little sister like a daughter. Emma took her promise as a solemn vow. On the stand at her sister's murder trial, Emma would say nothing against her and even claimed that the only hostility in the home was between her and Mrs. Borden, insisting that Lizzie harbored no ill will towards her stepmother. Did Emma conspire to have her father killed in an attempt to enact revenge on him for abusing her sister? Or merely to give Lizzie what she wanted, control of Andrew Borden's money? It's an interesting theory to consider. I tend to adhere to the problem-solving principle known as Occam's razor, which suggests that when faced with multiple explanations, the simplest one is usually the most accurate. If Lizzie Borden did murder her parents, the simplest explanation is that she was motivated by greed. If she desired to be free of the restrictions her father and society placed upon her, the only way to do this at that time was to become an orphan with an inheritance. In my opinion, Lizzie Borden didn't marry because if she had, her assets would become her husband's property. The money and property held in her name would only truly become hers upon her father's death, and if she remained unmarried. But there was a problem. I believe she and Emma were worried that her father meant to have a will drawn up naming his wife as his heir. At least 2 witnesses came forward during the investigation to report that Andrew Borden had inquired about drawing up a will. The rift between Andrew and his daughters occurred after he sided with his wife over his daughters in a financial matter. Afterward, Emma and Lizzie began shunning their stepmother and later their father as well. Perhaps witnessing the greed exhibited by his daughters, Borden felt the need to draw up legal papers so his wife would be provided for after his death. He would have realized then that he couldn't count on his daughters to do so. This would explain reports of Abby Borden stating that she was set to inherit valuable property or, quote, a great deal of property. Not satisfied with inheriting only a portion of her father's assets, if any, and that she would become beholden to her stepmother's generosity or lack thereof, perhaps Lizzie Borden took matters into her own hands. There is evidence of Lizzie's materialism, greed, and willingness to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. Both her father and the police generally agreed that it was Lizzie who was responsible for the cash and valuables stolen from the Borden home. It's also known that after Lizzie received her inheritance and moved to Maplecroft, she had a habit of pinching items from local shops. Salespeople began noticing items missing after she visited their businesses. This happened so frequently that shop clerks began itemizing the stolen items and sending the bills to the Borden sisters' address. I assume Emma or a secretary paid these bills, as the police were never involved. Except once, when Lizzie gifted a stolen item to a friend. Lizzie's friend brought the gift, a unique porcelain plaque, to a gallery in Providence, Rhode Island for restoration. The salesperson recognized it as a piece that had been reported stolen and asked where the customer had acquired it. She said Miss Lizzie Borden from Fall River, Massachusetts, had given it to her. The salesperson notified the gallery manager, who reported it to the police. A warrant was issued for Lizzie's arrest. The matter must have been settled in some other way, because although she was not arrested, the incident was reported in newspapers. Of course, being a thief does not make one a murderer. However, it does establish a pattern of behavior, the willingness to break the law in a brazen way to get what one wants. The Lizzie Borden case and the murders of Andrew and Abby Borden continue to resonate with the public over 130 years later. The Borden sisters didn't sell the 2nd Street house, but kept it as an investment for some time before putting it on the market. In 1896, the address was changed from 92 2nd Street to 230 2nd Street. The McGinn family purchased the house in 1948. Martha McGinn, the McGinn's granddaughter, inherited the house and turned it into a bed and breakfast in 1996. According to Martha, the room where Abby Borden was murdered was the most requested booking. The house was sold again in 2004 and opened for tours by the new owners. Memorabilia of the murders was displayed for curious visitors. The 2nd Street house last sold in 2021 for a reported $2 million. The new owner is Lance Zoll, who owns the television show Ghost Adventures. The house now appears much the same as in 1892, with furnishings and decorations replicating the Borden's home as closely as possible. Visitors to the Lizzie Borden house can tour the home and book an overnight stay. Guests have the option to stay in any one of the rooms or reserve the entire house. Rooms start at about $300 per night. 90-minute tours are held daily, and ghost tours of Fall River and the Oak Grove Cemetery, where the Bordens are buried, occur nightly. You can even purchase a Lizzie Borden house hatchet in the gift shop. Described as a collector's item and listed at $49.99, the hatchet is, quote, meticulously crafted to replicate the iconic hatchet associated with Lizzie Borden. The gift shop website states, it is a great gift for those with a keen interest in true crime stories. Not too weird. That will do it for this episode of Once Upon a Crime, and we'll wrap up our series on the true tale of Lizzie Borden. Follow Once Upon a Crime on social media and weigh in. Would you book a room at the Lizzie Borden house? Are you dying to take a ghost tour of Fall River? Pun intended. Do you believe Lizzie Borden was innocent, or did she get away with murder? Get links to our Facebook group and page and our Instagram and TikTok pages on our website, truecrimepodcast.com, to interact with us. Once Upon a Crime is written and produced by me, Esther Sanchez Ludlow. My executive producer is Lorena Garcia, and my researcher is Emma Battaglia. Get your tickets to CrimeCon UK being held in London on June 7th and 8th, and use our code ONCEUPON to get a discounted ticket. Go to crimecon.co.uk to find out all the details and register, and I'll see you there. Until next time, be good to one another.